Okay, so let's talk about how the Articles failed. Okay, so we've been talking about the Articles of Confederation, and you need to know how it failed, so let's get in there. In fact, it had no power to tax, which meant that the central government couldn't pay for anything. There was no executive branch to enforce the laws passed by the legislature, and there was no judiciary to interpret the laws. Any kind of change to the Articles required the consent of all the states. The main purpose of this convention was to revise the Articles of Confederation, but it ended up creating a new constitution. And you're going to find lots of helpful stuff, including a review game and a full-length practice test. We'll talk about that next. Okay, so to review, the Articles of Confederation was the first governing document of the United States. It created a very weak central government that ultimately proved to be ineffective. Delegates met in Philadelphia to try to revise the Articles, but they ended up writing a new constitution. That constitution created a federal government with much more power than the one that had been created under the Articles. And as we've seen, the states weren't willing to give up any of their power. So the Articles created a very limited central government. And this was by design, right? The framers of the Constitution didn't want a tyrannical central government like the one they had under the British. But they also didn't want no central government at all. So they created a central government with very limited authority. The Articles created a unicameral legislature, meaning that there was only one house in Congress. Each state got one vote regardless of size or population. So a small state like New Hampshire had the exact same amount of power as a massive state like Virginia. So the Articles of Confederation was the governing document of the United States from 1777 to 1789. It created a very weak central government. It did establish a procedure for amending the Articles, but it required the agreement of all 13 states for an amendment, which was basically impossible because each state was sovereign. So if one state didn't want to give up any of its power, then the Articles couldn't be amended. So the central government couldn't do anything, and the states were constantly fighting with each other over land and resources. Plus, we had war debts and the government couldn't pay them. So what you had was this massive rebellion known as Shays' Rebellion. It was led by a man named Daniel Shays, who was a veteran of the Revolutionary War. He and his followers basically rebelled against the government because they were tired of the government not paying their debts. They wanted the government to assume their debts.